Nathaniel W. Martin. Here is Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me say Hotep Habarigani to my Africana Studies colleagues, contemporaries, and searchers after truth. My name is, let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night, and never ever goodbye, because I find goodbyes traumatizing. My name is the Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles, and we're located at 8916 South Main. We're being hosted by our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, of whom the Reverend Dr. Della F. Holliness is my good friend. And they always say when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always going to be a shouting in the camp. And we invite you to any and all of our services, and we look forward to welcoming you in the very near future. The offering that you are looking at right now is entitled It's Time, and it is a social justice representation, or presentation more correctly, where we try to tie the events, current events, to their scriptural roots, or at least give you some spiritual insight as to why things are as they are. All right, so with that said, our time is limited. Let's start with the poverty notes. Here in the United States, they're going about what they call the Great Unwinding, where they are unwinding those child tax credits that they gave out during COVID. For instance, the children's health insurance program is being reduced and cut back. He had reduced child poverty to the lowest rates, and it helped to pull and mitigate for food insecurity and hunger for millions of families. And they were able to stay in their homes during the COVID because of the eviction moratoriums. Now, the child tax credit is being rolled back. It was rolled back in last year in 2022, second half of 2022, and that's what we call the Great Unwinding, because it's a euphemism for the deliberate, brutal reduction to Medicaid expansions in dozens of states. Between 15 million to 24 million families, a lot of them with children, were helped by the child tax credit during the COVID-19 pandemic. But now that they are being disenrolled, that means 15 to 24 million people. 15 to 24 million. That's a lot of people that are being disenrolled. So we need prayer. Scripture says righteousness exalteth the nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. To any people. Doesn't mean whether the United States or some other country. Sin is a reproach to any country. All right. Remember, poverty in our culture is a policy choice. It is a policy that we put people, that the government or the corporations or the private entities put people into poverty by their firings, by their laying them off, by their paying them the lowest wages that they can get away with. Poverty in America is a choice, and it is enforced upon most people by those who do not have any worries about poverty. So you have to always factor one thing in against the other. I knew all my lifetime when I was young, I had trouble getting work, looked like trouble. Folks didn't want to see you working. And the Lord had to bless me anyhow. And so I can imagine how it is if you're going out there now in middle age and older. I'm 75, so I call that old, but then there are people older than I. But of course they're not working either. But all I'm saying is if they didn't want you to work when you were young, they sure ain't gonna want you to work when you get old. All right. It's the neglect and animus by both the Democrats and the Republicans and the Independents. Remember, poverty is a political choice. Okay. It says in the PPIC that the economic rollback will condemn millions to cruel and unnecessary poverty. And so we have to redouble our prayers, because we're going to have to open up those church pantries, those school pantries, and because coming up Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, there's going to be a great outcry, and it's going to be right here in this country. All right, moving on. It is said that a writer and a surgeon have one thing in common. They both seek after the truth. The doctors have to have a good prescription, a good assessment, rather, of your condition in order to write you a decent prescription. And of course, a writer is a surgeon of the heart and soul. And the scholar, rather, has the duty, has the obligation, and has to dedicate himself to seeking the truth. And that is why we have these social justice offerings, because we have to try to help each other the best we can, encourage each other as we may, and hope that we can steer each other into the right direction. All right. The writer, the Kenyan writer, who was for years a professor of comparative literature out at UC Irvine, has some interesting things to tell us about language. He says that language is crucial in our economic, political, and our sociological development. Language is a carrier of memory. Language, I said. By controlling language, by controlling a people's language, you get at that which cements the whole economic, socio-political, and psychological aspects of that community. Language is part of a vast naming system. You name it, you own it. Only by naming do you identify the various elements in an environment. For instance, in Robinson Crusoe's novel, which I've never read, but I've heard excerpts from it, you find out that when Robinson Crusoe, was cast upon this desert island, he found one human being there. And obviously this human being had no history, because Robinson Crusoe tells him, I'm going to name you Friday. If you name something, you own it. That is why language is so important. That's why memory is so important, because we remember from how we did it in the past, and that helps us in the present with the eye toward tomorrow. In other words, if I know how to cook because I've learned it in the past. Well, now I can cook today, and they ought to have something for tomorrow. And you can, of course, extrapolate that in various examples. I need not press the point. But back to the Robinson Crusoe story. He names this man Friday. I said Robinson Crusoe names this man. Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o says that you are Friday and my name is Master. In other words, Robinson Crusoe impresses upon the body of this man the name of Friday. And so he imposes the Crusoic memory. I'm sure this person had a civilization or a society from which he came from also. But now he is only Friday, and when he refers to Robinson Crusoe, he doesn't refer to him as Mr. Crusoe. He calls him Master. All right. So memory is crucial to self-image. I thought that would be a little tidbit that we could chew on. He goes on, Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, pardon me, stumbling over these names, trying to get more fluid in pronouncing these African names. I love them. And I'm trying my best to get my tongue around these various names, African words, because we know I know too many European words, but I don't know enough of my African language. All right. Now he says, Professor wa Thiong'o says that wherever the European went, he planted his language and he planted his memory on the place and the people where he conquered. For instance, when you go east, you go to New York. So that was another York, but this is New York. Or you go to the New England. And so there is another England, but this is New England. But it's not my England. It's only the European's memory of his homeland. And he transports those names from his homeland to wherever he goes. You might remember that when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, that he renamed the city Alexandria, which formerly was not Alexandria, it was Thebes. But now it's Alexandria, has a European name. You have to watch that. Professor wa Thiong'o says the old memory is buried, and the new memory, we have to connect, and the new memory is the one that people see. And just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego in the Bible, well, that was not their given names. That was the names that the Babylonians gave to them. Shadrach is a Babylonian name. Meshach is a Babylonian name. And Abednego is a Babylonian name. That was not their original name. And so they were conscious enough not to be totally overtaken by the culture of Babylon. Even though they were young people when they originally came to Babylon, they had sense enough not to be seduced or lured into adopting all of the culture, all of the literature, all of the history, all of the memory of the Babylonians. And it's a truism that when a conqueror conquers a nation, he imposes his language and his terminology upon that conquered people. And that's why when the Babylonians would go to a place, they would rename everything with Babylonian names, and just like the Romans and did when they conquered. So it was a universal philosophy, a universal tactic of the conqueror. In other words, you first conquered with the sword, but then you conquered the mind, because when you put the shackles on the mind, then you can take the shackles off the hand. And just like when an elephant, a young elephant, baby elephant, gets that chain around their foot so that they cannot run away, years later they're grown and everything, but they still think they're on that chain. They only go to so far. So that's the power of the conqueror when he comes in, that he erases. And we have to remember, we have to discover again that which has been erased of our own selves, and put our memories back together. All right. You must sensitize people to the fact, as scholars, you must sensitize people to the fact that there are other languages. I have to learn that I have a language of my own. I have my own unknown African language. Was it Yoruba? Is it Igbo? Is it Zulu? Is it Swahili? There are thousands of languages of my culture, African culture, none of which I know. But I must expose myself as I may, and you likewise must expose yourself as you may, to recover those memories. Not because you forsake English or whatever language you speak, whether you speak French or German or some other European language, but you must also add to your store of language your own culture. And because that's a part of who you are, and allows you to have that much more of a sense of self, because we always need to improve our self-image, improve our self-esteem, and if we can root ourselves, or ground ourselves, or reconnect ourselves with our languages, then of course we help ourselves no end. All right, I'm going to stop there with that. I'm going to go on to another subject, and well, we're still dealing with poverty, but rich countries can borrow with no interest rate, low or no. When the 2008 economic crash came, those General Motors and all of those companies, corporation, were given money, just given money. Goldman Sachs, Citibank, you name it, of the big five, of those big financial institutions, including Wells Fargo, which is where I bank. But they were given money by the U.S. government. They just shoveled it out, where you or I would have to fill out all kind of pages of an application, and we better not make one mistake on any box. But and yet we still might not get the money. But these big companies, corporations, well, they were just given that money. For instance, the United States spent $7 trillion on COVID-19, but they would not give a dime to the poorer countries to allow them to borrow. And so the World Bank and the IMF needs to make the same arrangements with the poor countries that they make with the rich or the wealthy countries, the G20. And someone has said that the G20 should add a 21st country. It should be the African Union, since the European Union is a part of the G20, and those are very limited. But if they added the African Union, they would add 1.4 billion people. And so that should be remedied. And they should allow the African Union countries to borrow with the same rate of interest that they allow the United States, France, Germany, Britain, Ireland, and all of those other countries to borrow at. You get me? In other words, it would be a big help to the African Union if they could borrow with zero interest. Amen to that. I would like to get zero interest myself. All right. And so you can see how one thing ties in with the other. We started out talking about child poverty. Now we're talking about world banks and world institutions and how countries are able to borrow in order to finance projects in their homeland. That's why the Western countries, United States included, are just criticizing the countries of Kenya and Ghana and all of those African countries for accepting money from China, because China loaned them the money with no string. As a matter of fact, China came in building highways, building railroads, building airports, building hospitals, things that the United States, nor any of the other so-called colonial powers were doing or have done. We have plenty of military installations, yes, but we don't help Ghana with the kind of help that China gives them, the Belt and Road process, the Chinese call it. They come in and they build a highway to connect one end of your country to the other end of your country. Well, now you got something to travel on. And the bill is going to come due down the road, but they were able to get the project completed. And so that means a whole lot to a poor country. You understand? Now, moving on, because in other words, the United States only gives what you call humanitarian aid. They give you some food or they give you some water, but they don't give you a highway. They won't build you a hospital. They're certainly not going to build you no airport. But they put their military installations in Kenya, and you can't come up there. You better not come up there. Better not come around there. But they don't do anything to better that country. But yet, once they get the military installation built, of course, they're looking down with their guns and their cannons and their tanks and their airplanes and all of that upon the host country. And remember, the host country was unwilling, was involuntary, just because they could not say no. And so then they were put in that position. And that is what U.S. foreign aid on the continent of Africa is for the most part. All right, now let us go to the war over there. We have a war in Ukraine, and you have an equal war in Israel, and you have another war in Sudan. And there are other wars in other places over in those war-torn areas. And the Israeli war is one for the books because it's complicated. You got the Ashkenazi Jew, he's fighting. 5 minutes? All right. You got the Ashkenazi Jew, you got the Ethiopian Jew, you got the Afro-Palestinian, you got the Afro-Arab community, and all of these. You got the Falasha Jews, which were the Jews that the Israelis brought over from Ethiopia because they are, I don't know why they brought them in there because they don't treat them right. But you got the Falasha Jews, you got the Bedouin Jews, and I mentioned the Ethiopian Jews. And so there is a complicated calculus that you and I must thread in, taking sides on one side or the other side. I just have to condemn Hamas because the people who are suffering are the people who didn't have nothing to do with nothing. And it's like they gave the Israelis carte blanche to come in and destroy them. It's like they had a meeting with Netanyahu because he was in trouble about changing the Supreme Court. And this war started, well, they just bailed him right on out, gave him a get out of jail free card. And he can talk about unity and all of us Israelis are one people now. But he wasn't one people when he was arguing to overthrow that Supreme Court, because the Jews were almost out fighting among each other in a civil war because they were so upset with what Netanyahu had proposed. And you must not forget, this is the background, as they say, that gave the Hamas the opportunity to train and get ready and then spring this attack on the unprepared, unsuspecting Israeli government. Plus, it was on a Sabbath day, which was Saturday. The critics are saying, why did it take the Israeli army all day to respond? Well, part of it was because it was a Sabbath day, and everybody was at temple, or were observing the Sabbath ritual. Anyway, those are my thoughts on today. Oh, I want to close out with the Rothschilds, because the Rothschilds are a banking family, and they have one of their own in all of the principal countries. For instance, they have a Rothschild in London, Rothschild family brand. London, England. They have Rothschilds in Paris, France. All right. They have Rothschilds in Frankfurt, Germany, Vienna, Austria, and Naples, Italy. Now, they don't have no Rothschilds here in the United States. I might stand corrected on that. But the Rothschild wealth enabled them to become the principal bankers in all of these other countries. Do you hear me? And so, and yes, they are Jews. And but they were smart enough, shrewd enough to plant branches of their family in all of the strategic countries, and all the countries that are colonial powers. The Rothschilds are banking those people. As I close, the Rothschild built the Israeli Supreme Court and places like that. All right, and as I get out of here, because my time is up, the auto workers are still on strike. They're still trying to get decent wages. And as I get out of here, I want to tell you, as I always tell you, if you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take my considered advice and don't work for them. Love you. Thank you, Doc. We out of here. Love you.
Lord.